Okay, so the play opens with the prologue, which is the introduction of the characters and the events of the play, and the parados, which is the appearance of the chorus. Now, so as mentioned in the previous video, our story begins in Corinth before the house of Jason, where the nurse laments about the events that have led to current circumstances, which is that our protagonist, Medea, has been cheated on by her husband Jason. Now, these events that the nurse is lamenting about include the fact that Jason was asked by King Peleus of Iolcus to attain the Golden Fleece. Medea helped him to attain the Golden Fleece in Colchis, but at the expense of betraying her family, and then they both fled to Corinth as exiles. Now here, the nurse juxtaposes the characters of Medea and Jason. Now Medea is described to be a wife who seeks to please her husband in all she does. And while the nurse describes this devotion as key to sustaining a quality marriage, that a marriage dictates that a husband can count on complete support from his wife, Medea is also very much in misery, surrendering herself to anguish and melting each passing hour with tears. And this is due to Jason's cheating. Now Jason is thus described to have betrayed Medea and his own children for a princess's bed. This, of course, referring to his marriage to Glaus. Now this is really important because this is how we're introduced to the focal characters, the cynosures, and these second-hand introductions, they position us to view the characters in particular ways. Now Medea, described as the dutiful wife, garners our sympathy, whereas Jason is conveyed to be a cheater, a breaker of oaths, for whom our sympathy is not warranted. Because of this, the nurse rightly states that where love once was deepest, a cancer spreads. And it is due to this cancer that the nurse becomes fearful that Medea will hatch some unheard of scheme, because according to the nurse, she hates her children. So even though there's this danger, it's always associated with the betrayal of Jason. Now the tutor enters with Medea and Jason's sons, and while the nurse justifies her lamentations by saying a good slave's heart shares the pain of her master's misfortune, the tutor confesses that he overheard a rumor that King Creon will be exiling Medea and her children from Corinth. Now, while the nurse questions whether or not Jason will tolerate this, the tutor claims that old ties of affection give way to new, meaning that his new association with Glaus and Creon is more important than his existing relationship with his kids. So again, we're being positioned here to view Jason quite unsympathetically. Now, similarly, the tutor later claims that no one loves his neighbor more than himself, which is highlighting that perceived selfish quality of men. And even the nurse, in her anger, argues that death's not good enough for him, and where he should be showing love, he's proving a traitor. Now, another interesting point that's made here is the way that the nurse speaks of Medea. Now, it's true that she warns the tutor to keep the children away from Medea while she's in her depressive state for fear that she will harm them, but even so, it's not Medea that the nurse is putting the responsibility on, but rather Medea's anger. She says that anger of hers won't die down until someone's felt the force of her thunderbolt. And similarly, she refers to her savage temperament and her stubborn will and unforgiving nature. So again, Medea herself is not actually being incriminated here or blamed, but her anger is, her emotion is. And we've already been positioned to believe that that anger, those emotions, are merely products of Jason's betrayal, the sting of injustice. So the question that's posed here is who is really to blame? Now, during this time, Medea's lamentations are heard from inside the house, which elicits the appearance of the chorus of Corinthian women, who explain their concern for Medea since they have given their loyal friendship to the house, which, by the way, in theory, the house means Medea, her sons, and Jason as well. Now, while Medea continues to indulge in her depressive state, saying that she would like to leave loathsome life behind, she prays to Themis and Lady Artemis. Now this causes the nurse to become concerned because the fact that she's appealing to the gods means that it is likely she will not lightly abandon her rage. Now the chorus asks the nurse to bring Medea forth from inside the house, which she promptly does. When Medea appears, she monologues to the chorus, but the highlights are that she believes there is no justice in the eyes of men, that she has been wronged by the unexpected blow of circumstance, and that Jason is the foulest of traitors. Now, she also argues that women are the most miserable of specimens, and this is due primarily to the inequitable gender roles that are traditional within the temporal setting of ancient Greek society. Now, these gender roles dictate that divorce brings disgrace on a woman, but at the same time, women do not have control over whether or not they divorce. The only happy marriage would be one that is to a man who finds marriage a yoke he bears with ease, while anything else would mean that they're better off dead. Now, men, however, are permitted to expel their frustrations from dissatisfying marriages by going into battle. and Medea feels that she would rather face the enemy 3 times over than bear a child once. Now, while Jason and men in general enjoy life's pleasures, Medea perceives herself to be abandoned, homeless, as a direct result of Jason's actions. Now, the most important detail to take note of here is probably the fact that there's a very discernible disconnect between the traditional gender role of a female and Medea herself. She's very strongly suggesting that the expected role of a woman, at least in Corinth, is too restricting, and it's not conducive to Medea's nature. Now, at this point, Medea asks the chorus to grant her a small kindness, and this is that if she were to exact some form of revenge against her husband for the suffering he has caused her, she needs one thing: your silence. Now, the chorus leader agrees and even goes so far as to say that it is just that you should take revenge upon your husband. Now, this is extremely important for 2 reasons. Now, the first is that before the chorus, or even the reader, becomes aware of the exact nature of Medea's revenge, which is that she wants to kill her children in an effort to hurt Jason, before that idea is even mentioned, the chorus has echoed that notion that Medea is entitled to revenge. And so what the chorus has done here is they validated Medea's feelings. They validated her revenge without knowing what that revenge entails. Now, they've essentially told Medea, yep, totally cool for you to get back at Jason. So that's some pretty significant prompting and encouragement that conceivably contributes to the destruction that Medea goes on to cause. Now, the second reason this is important is because Medea asked for one thing: the silence of the chorus. Now, by making this request and having the chorus agree to it, it arguably becomes an oath, a promise, and in the temporal setting, oaths are clearly shown to be something of immense value, and the breaking thereof can elicit the wrath of the gods. So what's happened here essentially is that before we even know what Medea intends to do, the chorus has already said, yep, it's okay for you to get your revenge, and I won't even tell anyone about it because I got your back. So maybe they're a little bit to blame as well. Okay, now we're in what you could conceivably describe as the first episode of the play, the first scene where there is a significant exchange of dialogue. Now, this exchange is between Medea and King Creon. Now, King Creon enters, immediately condemning Medea's sullen looks and angry feelings, as well as ordering her immediate exile from Corinth. Now, Medea continues to lament about her suffering and challenges Creon's decision, to which Creon simply replies, I fear you, because he believes that Medea might do some irreparable harm to his daughter, given that Medea has a reputation for being a sorceress and no stranger to dark knowledge. Now, Creon also says that he has received news of potential threats from Medea, and so he's taking all precautions to protect his family. Now, Medea replies that this is not the first time her reputation has hurt her and caused her serious harm. Now, whether or not this is what Creon meant, Medea says, due to her special knowledge, she has fallen victim to this misfortune of being unusually clever, which has earned her the envy and hostility of those around her. Now, at the same time, however, Medea assures Creon that she has nothing against him, for he only has his daughter's best interests at heart, but rather, Medea's hatred is reserved only for Jason, and as such, Creon should not fear her. Now, Creon is skeptic and rightly states that it's difficult to guard against an enemy who is clever and controls her tongue, that is, having the ability to manipulate with words. Now, more firmly, Creon orders her immediate exile, but Medea then falls to her knees, takes Creon's hand, and appeals to his sense of fatherhood. She agrees that she should be exiled, but she asks Creon to grant her a single day so that she will be able to make preparations for her sons since they have been neglected by their father. Now, as a father himself, Creon should understand and sympathize with this. Now, Creon responds in an interesting way. He claims that, in showing respect to petitioners, I have too often invited disaster. And I see my own error, but for all that, your wish will be granted. So even though he knows it's against his better judgment to do so, and even though it's caused him harm in the past, his sympathy prevails and he allows Medea the extra day. Now, what happens next is also interesting. Creon says that if she stays any longer, Medea will be put to death, and then he departs, after which Medea is now back on her feet and composed, which suggests that the entire appeal was just for show. It was an example of the extent to which she can effectively manipulate others. Now, she even says to the chorus, do you imagine I would ever have stooped to flattery of this man without having some profit, some scheme in mind? Medea says that Creon was essentially so advanced in folly. However, we already saw that he knew of Medea's danger. However, his sympathy was greater. So it wasn't actually folly, it was emotion. Now, an extra day might not seem like a big deal, but this extra day gives Medea the time to finish plotting and planning her revenge, which at this point, Medea reveals to be the killing of Jason, his new wife, as well as Creon. Now here, Medea starts to entertain different thoughts of killing these enemies. She even says she has no shortage of deadly roots which will lead to their deaths, implying that she is very well versed in the act of murder. Now Medea resolves that she will resort to poison, as this is a form of killing in which she is particularly expert. And this is because she doesn't want to screw it up and give her enemies a chance to laugh at her. And this is important because it shows us that Medea's reputation is something that she values. She said to Creon that it has brought her harm, but here she actually prizes that reputation, so we can assume that when she said that to Creon, that was actually crap. But regardless, if all else fails, Medea swears by Hecate that she will kill her enemies even if it's by hand and sword, and even if she has to die because of it. Interestingly, after resolving to kill, Medea contradicts gender roles again when she says that we are women, quite helpless in doing good but surpassing any master craftsman in working evil. Now to this the chorus responds, "No more shall we women endure the burden of ill repute." So there's this suggestion here that these gender roles are not only restrictive to Medea, but to the chorus of Corinthian women as well. And even though Medea has revealed her plan to murder these three people, the chorus still seems to be in support of that. They have said nothing to dissuade Medea. They still sympathize with Medea since she has been driven without rights into exile, and the binding spell of oaths has vanished due to the betrayal of Jason. Whew.